Hey everybody, Calvin is back in the news. Logan, who works for the US Air Force, thinks he saw something that looked like the Calvine diamond faceted shape out of a US Air Force airplane window while flying between Reykjavik in Iceland and Frankfurt in Germany. Here's Logan telling his story to James Fox.
Hey, thanks so much, Logan. It's so great to hear you talk here. One of the in my humble opinion, best photographs of a UAP ever taken was the Calvine 1990, referred commonly as the Calvine incident, the Calvine UFO or UAP. You kind of blew my mind as to being potentially a witness. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yes. So in 1990, January 1990, I was assigned to go to my first intel unit overseas, going to Europe, and the exercise that normally would take place back then. Anybody in the military that's been in since the 80s and the 90s would know the term reforger. Stands for return of forces back to Germany, because we always thought we were going to fight in the Fulda Gap against Russian forces. And what was funny was on the flight over to Rhine-Main, the base that was open at the time, we were between Iceland and Scotland, and I was eating on a Philadelphia cheesesteak. Um, if nobody's been to Philly, go get a cheesesteak, by the way. Anyway, we were coming down, and the sun was just coming up, and me and the guy that was sitting next to me were eating, and I looked out of the window, and there was a diamond-shaped object zigzagging in the clouds. And I was like, what is that? And the guy's like, yeah, what is that? And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, hey, I'm going to my first intel assignment. Oh my God, this is probably some super secret, cool, what do you know? I'm going to find out about it. So I kind of played it off. This thing disappeared in the clouds, and we landed. And I asked my bosses at the time, hey, what's out there that does all the zigzaggy stuff? Everybody looked at me like I was an idiot. So I found out years later, shortly after, I had NATO AWACS show up where I was at. They said, "Hey, what are you doing with the Americans? You're from England. You should come fly with us." So I was like, "Sure." So I took that as the opportunity to ask the question, "What's out there that's doing all the weird zigzaggy stuff?" um, and they were like, "You know," and I was like, "No, I don't know." And so they showed me this tape, and they said I saw something whiz right through the air traffic of all the aircraft that were flying around. And I said, what was that? They said, that was your SR-71. And I said, oh, then that's not it. And then they pulled out something else, and they showed something zigzagging just like I saw it in the clouds over between Iceland and Scotland. And I was like, yeah, that guy. And they said, we don't know who he is. We always thought you guys knew who he is. We always just assumed it was you Americans playing with us. So, long story short, to fill in the rest of what James is saying, this was also at the tail end of the Belgian wave, which I didn't know anything about. But after I did the interview with James, James was throwing something at me, and he showed me the Calvine picture, and it was the exact same thing that I saw. And I was like, what is that? Because I had never heard of this Calvine picture. And he's like, dude, it was the same year. I think it was in August. You saw your thing in January. I was like, the only difference I saw was the object that I saw was kind of going between black and white. And in the picture that I saw, it looked kind of whitish, but it was the exact same thing. And I was like, okay, this just kind of adds to the picture that there's definitely something going on, because I didn't even know about this thing. And James kind of shocked me with that one.
So let me ask you, when you say AWACS, so they picked it up on radar?
Yes.
So they picked it up on radar. How many sets of eyeballs on it?
On the screen, there was a bunch of guys in the back that all saw it. But I was asking the question, like, who is this guy? They said, dude, he said, we vectored aircraft towards it, and as soon as the aircraft get close, it zips off somewhere else and whatever. And I was like, who else knows about this? And they're like, everybody. I said, everybody in your squadron? He goes, yeah, we all know about it. And I was like, okay, if you say so. So it was just one of those notes that you kind of put down and put in the back of your head, and just kind of, okay, someone verified what I saw, and it was unusual, and you kind of throw it away. But it's, again, until James popped up with this image, I was like, oh crap, there it is.
So you're telling me you saw, and they picked up on radar, an object that exhibited a wild technology with no wings, no visible means of propulsion type of thing?
Well, you can't, on a radar, you can't see all that stuff. You just know it's an object.
But you saw it with your eyes too.
It's just zipping around.
But you saw it with your eyes too, not just the radar, right?
What I saw, yes. Okay. But what they were seeing on the radar was something totally different. Okay. Now, I didn't correlate it to what date and all that other stuff, because I was just in shock that they had something that was zigzagging around and whatever. But what I saw outside the window was it would go into a cloud, and as fast as it was moving, you would expect it to just pop back out at the same angle, but it would come back out at a different vector. And I was like, dude, what is that? And I thought I was seeing something at first, until the other guy confirmed that he was seeing it too. Because, you see all kinds of weird things out of the window sometimes, on the ground. You're not quite sure what it is. It could be a car, it could be a truck, or, some sunlight glinted off something on the ground. But in this particular case, I had confirmation beside me. And then when I talked to these guys, they confirmed that there was something out there that was zipping around, exhibiting the exact characteristics that I saw.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's really impressive. It's another little piece of the puzzle on that case.
Thanks, Logan and James. I think that's really interesting. The sighting, as he said, was in January 1990, and the famous Calvine photograph was spotted in August 1990. So the years add up. But it raises a few questions. Let's try and answer this. Is Logan's sighting the same craft? Where did he see it, and what can we learn from what he saw? Here's the air nav map from a commercial flight, Lufthansa, from Reykjavik to Frankfurt. I'm assuming the Air Force would take roughly the same straight line route. Now, Logan says that he was eating a Philly cheesesteak for breakfast. Yum. In-flight catering had worked out there was enough time for people to eat their breakfast while they were at cruise altitude before they started final approach into Frankfurt. So that would put them, as a guess, because I'd love to know, somewhere over Scotland or the North Sea, as you can see from this route. That might be a big clue. A lot of people have said that the object, the Calvine diamond shape, might have come from Leuchars. The other obvious base is Machrihanish, my old hometown on the west coast of Scotland. But I heard something different. While investigating all possibilities of what the Calvine object might be, people reached out to me. One person from BAE Systems from this airport called Wharton. And he shared some very interesting information. First of all, that BAE Systems have Harriers. In fact, a pair of Harriers, which could be hired by the MOD, NATO, or the US Air Force for some kind of flight test. And Calvine itself is only 30 minutes flight time in a Harrier. So if it was a Harrier in the famous picture, and possibly a second Harrier, I think that they might have come from Wharton. But he went on to say something very interesting. He didn't know exactly what the object was, but he did say it looked very reminiscent of a reflective radar object. But why flight test it? Because they would flight test it at Wharton on a pole at the end of the runway. Why would it be flying? The only flight testing that BAE Systems does, listen to this very carefully, he said, was off the east coast of Scotland at BAE Systems' secret North Sea range. Well, that adds up exactly to Logan's flight plan, and possibly while he was eating. And the northeast of Scotland is perfect timing for eating a Philly cheesesteak while at 30,000 feet before beginning your final approach into Frankfurt. So was the object that Logan and others, I wish we had the other witnesses as well, definitely saw somewhere over the North Sea, off the northeast coast of Scotland? And could that possibly be a BAE Systems test zone for exotic aircraft? I don't know. But that raises a much bigger question. Logan describes the craft he saw as a segmented or faceted diamond. Well, that's very similar to the Calvine object. But Logan said it was zooming around, zipping out of clouds. At one point, he said it went into a cloud, disappeared, and then it came out of the cloud on a different vector, meaning a different direction. So it was a zigzag, high-speed object. That's not a balloon, is it? Over the last few days, I've had a lot of very interesting engineers challenging me about the aerogel drone possibility in relation to Jake Barber's egg, because they ask a very good basic engineering question, and that is, what's the advantage, Simon, of a vacuum balloon over a pressurized helium balloon? And I really can't answer that. I asked Joshua, the man who revealed the patent behind the DOE building aerogel vacuum craft, possibly at Los Alamos Laboratories and possibly for the NRO. But what is the advantage of having a vacuum aerogel craft over a pressurized helium buoyant craft? Well, let's first of all look at what these craft are, and they definitely exist. They are HAPS, H-A-P-S. Some people call HAPS high altitude platform systems, and the idea is that they can loiter over an area of interest longer than a drone. So you can have a HAPS type surveillance system over a conflict zone for months. And I think that possibly is what happened in the Calvine case because of the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. But in some defense articles, they translate the acronym HAPS rather differently, and they describe HAPS as high altitude pseudo satellites. Well, that makes a lot of sense. A LEO, low Earth orbit surveillance satellite would only zip past the thing you're interested in for maybe 2 minutes, and then it would take 90 minutes to go around the Earth, if that's the right figures, people. But imagine a buoyant craft that can long loiter over the area of interest. Now, that makes a lot of sense. But does aerogel vacuum buoyant crafts make any sense? I'm not sure they do. Now, Joshua revealed the patent for vacuum drones, so I think people have been experimenting with a vacuum as a buoyant craft, but it has an inherent problem. The problem is a normal buoyant craft is a pressurized envelope, and you put helium in it, and it's pushing out, and it goes up, and it can long loiter if it's got some kind of station keeping. But a vacuum drone has to overcome the crushing pressure of having nothing inside it. So it needs to be rather heavier, made of solid stuff to resist that crushing. I mean, that's why early vacuum balloons were a great idea, but weren't adopted. Now, aerogel might be the answer, and everybody, it's not the aerogel, the friable stuff. It's the hard, probably aeroloi metallic foam, but that's going to have some weight. So an aerogel drone to have any buoyancy needs to be big, 20, 30, 40 foot. And sure enough, the patent says it could be egg-shaped or tic-tac shaped, which is interesting. But in the Calvine case, imagine you were deploying the Calvine craft as an aerogel drone. You would have to have maybe a 20, 40, 50-foot Calvine diamond up in Perthshire on the back, what, of a lorry? You'd have to close the roads and take down the streetlights, to get it there. And then it would be one thing which would rise up. Whereas a balloon, you could fit in a box and then pressurize it. It would pop out and then go up. Engineers out there, try and explain to me why a vacuum buoyant craft, which was solid and heavy, is advantageous over a helium craft. I asked Joshua, and he said, well, helium's rare. But, at these kind of payment levels, I think you could buy helium if you were the Los Alamos DOE laboratory. It doesn't really make any sense. If they exist and they're used, there must be some operational advantage of a vacuum buoyant craft. What I don't dispute is HAPS exist, high altitude, long loitering surveillance platforms. I would want one if I had the NRO budget. I don't. And I wouldn't have it tethered, because if it was over an area of conflict, a wire or a string going down to the ground would compromise, of course, who was running it. What you'd want is a station-keeping drone that would keep in, say, a kilometre radius, always looking down, that could be up there for, as I say, 6 months would be absolutely brilliant. Probably transmitting its signal from its sensors upwards to a satellite asset and having SAR, synthetic aperture radar, photographic capabilities and communication. Yes, I'm sure they exist, but people out there, was the Calvine UFO a buoyant craft? I think it probably was, but was the Calvine UFO and the egg, Jake's Barber's egg, a vacuum aerogel buoyant craft? Well, if they were, and now I'm beginning to have some doubts, what is the advantage of a vacuum buoyant craft? We need to cut through the woo-woo and understand the engineering. Sure, Logan saw something from his plane. It was zipping around. A buoyant craft doesn't move around fast. It only goes up and down. He saw something fast moving. It must have had some interesting novel propulsion system. I think the truth might still be out there.